This is my old server, and it's time to upgrade. This was my previous server. It was a Dell PowerEdge R720 2U unit. I upgraded this thing when I got it to 128 gigs of RAM and two 10-core E5 2690 V2 CPUs. The thing ran great. I literally had no problems with it. The only problems I'd say I'd have is it didn't have NVMe by default. I had to actually add a card to get that to work, and then run a like a booter off the internal USB. It wasn't too much work, but I did have to Google a bit to figure out how to do it. Like I said, this thing ran fine, but it also ran two 750 watt power supplies. It's an older architecture. It used a lot of power that I never really, used, which I had planned to, but never got around to. So that's why I'm kind of getting rid of this and building a new PC. This is going to be my server build. Starting off with the case, we have a Silverstone case. I don't know the model off the top of my head. I will list it when I'm doing the build. It has 8 hard drive bays. It also has a 5.25 bay for a optical drive if you choose to use one like I am. And then it actually has a space for a slim drive also if you want to do an optical drive that way. USB-C, aux jack, a couple standard USB ports, a reset button, which is nice, and these buttons are nice and clicky. Going to the side, I'll show you a little more when I'm building it, but you can see the 8 ports, and they all have a basically a SATA plug-in right there. You can just plug in. I already have the SAS cable plugged in there to all 8 ports, and it either uses Molex for power, or in my case, I'm using PCI Express power, or not PCI Express, but SATA power. So let's look at the rest of the build. I have the SAS card. Once again, I will give the model while I'm building it. A P400 Quadro I'm going to be using for Plex for transcoding. A 10 gigabit SFP card with the 10 gigabit adapter there. For my RAM, I'm using 64 gigs of 6000 megahertz RAM, a 750 watt power supply. Now I know this isn't the highest rated, but it was rated like in the tier list. It's about a B tier, so it should be fine for what I'm doing. I have a Ryzen 7 7700X and a Peerless Assassin 120 for the cooler. For my main drive, I am going to be reusing a 1 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe Sabrent drive. And I'm going to have a secondary drive, which is going to be my Steam drive. This isn't going to have any redundancy or anything. It's just for installing games across the network. It's just a 2 terabyte old Intel 660p drive, which is still more than enough to fully utilize the 10 gigabit. And then for my motherboard, first thing I noticed, this really bothered me. Noticed how it says this listing is for the motherboard, Wi-Fi antenna, and M.2 screws only. The I/O shield is not included, which really bugs me because this was in really tiny print when I went back and looked at the listing and I didn't notice it. The other thing that bothers me is this is an Asus. I can't stand Asus, and if you've followed the news about them, you know why. The way they treat customers and the way they've treated me in the past, including denying a warranty on a motherboard because an RGB LED on the back of the board fell off. And they denied a warranty because of that. Anyway, the only reason I bought this is because it does have multiple PCI Express slots. I need one with at least 3 full for all the cards I'm using, and this was kind of the only option I could find. So let's go ahead and get to building this computer. As much as I like this case, it was a bit difficult to work with. It is a micro ATX case. So if you have a bigger board like this Asus board that has a lot of features like 8 serial ATA, 4 PCI Express slots, it's basically a slightly bigger board. It was very hard to fit in this case, and I had to pull it out and put it back in multiple times to get it to work right. Also, if you do build in this case, I would highly recommend plugging in your cables first and then putting the board in, because as you can see underneath the serial ATA there, the board extends out, so it's hard to reach your hand underneath there and get the 24 pin. USB ports, and all that kinds of stuff. I ended up removing the SAS card due to it being unreliable. Windows actually kicked my drive array offline at one point due to data corruption. I decided at that point, since the motherboard has 8 SATA ports, I can just use them, and decided to use Windows storage spaces, which will allow me to move these drives from one PC to another without having to worry about hardware RAID. Speaking of Windows, I wanted to originally put Server 2022 on this, like on my Dell server, but unfortunately the AMD drivers just did not want to cooperate with Server 2022, so I ended up using Windows 11. I know a lot of you are probably out there yelling at your screen right now, telling me to use anything but Windows, and I don't disagree with you, but in my experience, just using what you are familiar with works best, especially when you have a full-time job and 2 YouTube channels you are trying to manage. After I had put this together, I noticed it was really loud. This was due to the 2 fans on the drive bays plugging directly into the SAS board, which is powered by SATA or Molex, so there's no way to control the fans. I ended up unplugging them from the board and plugging them into a 2-way PWM splitter and plugging that directly into the motherboard. After doing that, I was able to adjust the fan curve, and it was much quieter. Since I did remove the 8-port SAS controller and was just using the 8 SATA ports on the motherboard, I did have to add in a 4-port SATA card just so I could plug in my optical drive. I know most people probably don't care about optical media anymore, but I'll often go to Goodwill and pick up Blu-ray movies and then just simply rip them with my optical drive right onto my server. For my Windows install, I went with a modified version of Windows. This website, I'll put a link in the description, allows you to basically customize the way Windows installs. You can do things like bypass your Windows 11 requirements like TPM Secure Boot, things like the 4 gig option. You can choose a computer name beforehand. It kind of auto does everything for you if you want it to. You can still make choices. The only problem I found is if you try to set it up with a Microsoft account, it does cause problems. I let Windows create a setup for me, and then, for offline, and then once I got into Windows, I changed it myself. Otherwise, it got stuck on the part where it makes you create a PIN, and it just sat there loading forever. It includes a ton of different options. A lot of them I didn't, really mess with. But things like being able to right-click on your desktop and still having like the standard, like the Windows 10 menu instead of hitting more options, which I absolutely hate. Putting your start menu on the left. There's just so many options you can play with this. And all you do is, once you've chosen all your options, you go down to the bottom, you download an XML file, and then you simply drop it into your Windows installation USB, and then just run Windows installation as you would normally when you boot, and then it'll go through and do everything that you've asked it to do. As far as the computer running itself, there's really not too much to say about it. The case runs fairly cool. Looking at my CPU right here, you can see I'm running at like 36 degrees with that cooler on it. I'm not really doing anything at the moment, but even under load, it doesn't go too high, honestly. Even the hard drives with the PWM configuration, you can see they're running 27, 26, 25, 26. And then my NVMEs are running about 10 degrees hotter. But that's all within reason for this. As far as my hard drive configuration goes, most people would probably use some sort of RAID array. Once again, I just went with something easy that I'm familiar with. And honestly, the reason I didn't do that, because I've had issues with RAID arrays in the past where the controller itself fails, and then you have to deal with recovering files. So I went with Windows storage spaces. So let me go ahead and pull it up and show you what I did here. So in case you've never used it, it basically acts as a software RAID in Windows, and you can just pull these drives from any PC to, from one PC to another, and they still recognize it just fine. So you can see my, these are my 8 terabyte drives. I have 2 of them on RAID, or software RAID, or whatever you want to call it. And then my 2 12 terabytes that come out to 10.8. And they're all running fine. And if I go pull up my, what's it called? This, you can go ahead and see all my stuff going on here. And also, obviously, my optical drive that I use for, ripping movies to my movies folder. Earlier I mentioned I had a 10 gigabit card in the server. Now, nothing else on my network can do 10 gigabit yet. I mean, I have the network equipment to do it, but as far as PCs go, I'm not able to. I have an ITX main PC and a laptop. They both have 2.5 gig. I am waiting for the new AMD boards to come out that will have USB 4 so I can get a 10 gig adapter on my desktop. So the reason I did that, though, is because what you can do with Steam, like I have all my Steam games saved on the Intel 660p Gen 3 NVMe drive. So let's say I have right here, I already have this game. Actually, let's do, where's an easier one? A smaller game. There we go, American Truck Simulator. So I have this on my server. Let's say I go back to, I'm going to go ahead and close this out, go to my desktop. Where is Steam? There we go. Let's say I want to go ahead and install it here. We're going to go ahead and install it to the C drive. It's going to start the download. Hopefully it does what I want it to. Okay, see how it's transferring game files on local network from device server. Okay, so let's get this started here. You'll start to see the speeds. All right, so you can see now it is starting to ramp up. Yeah, 1.1 gigabit, 1.3. This should theoretically be able to get to about 2.5. My current internet connection is only 1 gigabit, so this is way faster than that. Yeah, 2.1, 2. Is it going to go above that? Regardless, you can see here, this is a 20 gigabyte game, and it is it's almost halfway done already in, just a couple minutes. Our current speed, we're now up to 2.3 gigabits per second, which is about usually where I see it cap out. It almost hits the 2.5. So that is the reason I use the 10 gigabit. So when I do get a 10 gigabit in my desktop PC, this will be done, 75% faster than what it's doing right now. The last thing I like to do is run virtualization on my server. So I just use Microsoft Hyper-V. Once again, I'm sure people are yelling at me to use something better, but once again, it's just something I'm used to. Windows 11 does not have it installed by default, so you have to turn it on just by searching for it and then enabling Hyper-V. Okay, it's going to go ahead and run through and do an install here. Okay, and then now it's, of course, going to require a reboot. Alright, now that it's done rebooting, if I go ahead and look up Hyper-V, there it is, Hyper-V Manager. Now, something to know, I have not set it up yet, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new, virtual machine here. I don't remember off the top of my head how to do this, but if you are installing Windows 11, you do have to enable TPM. I believe, where is it? I don't see it right here. I'm just going to go ahead and set up the machine real quick. So we're going to do a virtual machine. Next, we'll call this, let's see, just call it VM for virtual machine. Next, I don't remember. Okay, Gen 2. I have plenty of RAM, so I will just go ahead and go with 16. I don't know the exact number of that. Was it 16? I don't know. Whatever. 16 gigabytes. 16256. I'm sure that's wrong, and someone will yell at me for that too, but whatever. My Ethernet, we're going to do the default switch. Next. Size, I do not need a big drive for this. I'll just do like 60 gigabytes. Next, I will do an operating system later. Alright, and finish. Alright, so let's take a look here. So if you're installing Windows 11 on one of these things or a virtual machine, you have to go to Settings, Security, and enable trusted platform module. Otherwise, Windows will give you an error. So that is that. Let me go ahead and get a copy of Windows and start installing it just to show you. Alright, so now that I got that downloaded, I'm going to make a couple changes real quick to this. So let's go to settings. First thing I want to do is I do not need 8 processors for this thing. Let's drop it down to 4, which is technically 2 processors, or 2 cores, and actually, so 4. Basically 2 physical cores, and then the, not hyper-threading, but whatever AMD calls theirs. So let's go ahead and apply that. And we're going to add hardware. We're going to do a SCSI adapter, or in this case, a SATA drive or DVD drive for the ISO I got. We're going to add that. We're going to specify an image file. Let's go to my downloads for the Windows. There it is. Open, apply, and then let's go ahead and start it. I don't know if it's going to boot on its own. Hyper-V. All right, let's see what it does. Yeah, I'm going to have to probably change something here to make it boot off the DVD drive first. I was hoping it would do that, but apparently it's not going to. Okay, so it's been a while since I've done this. I don't remember where it was at. I have to go to settings, firmware. We're going to move the DVD up in the boot order. Hit apply. Okay, and let's go ahead and start this again. It should now, yeah, there we go. Press any key to boot. And now this is basically going to act like a Windows 11 install. When I first set up Windows on the VM, I ran into a bit of a problem where it did not allow me to log in. It just gave me a blank screen or the Windows background. This happened only when using a Microsoft account. So if this happens to you, what you need to do is you basically need to go up to your menu at the top, click on View, and then click on Enhance Session. That'll bring you into Windows or allow you to use your PIN to sign in. And then go to sign-in options on your device or in the control panel and get rid of the option that says for improved security, only allow Windows Hello sign-in from Microsoft accounts on this device. So the next thing I wanted to do was to share my 2 drives, so anywhere on the network I can access them. I've already done it, but let me just show you how I did it. I just basically went to Properties, Sharing, Advanced Sharing. I went to permission, or I had to do share this folder, which I've already done. Permissions, basically everyone, allow, okay, and then close, and the same with this one. So basically now when I try to log in from my other computer, once it connects, it's going to ask me for my account information, which I already have put in. Basically now, though, I need to get my IP address. So this is what my internal IP address is. So let's go back here and do, let's see, back on my desktop. See if I did this right. 2.168. What was it? I don't remember. .1.245. Oh, dang it. 192.168.1.245. Next. Okay, now it's going to ask me for my credentials. Let me go ahead and punch those in. All right, once I got my password and everything put in correctly, I now have access to both my drives on the server. It's going to take a moment because I haven't spun up these drives yet in a while. So there we go. I have my movies collection, I have my TVs collection, and then in here I also have all my personal files. So now I have everything saved across the network, and I can easily access them at any point. I also like to do this. I like to map them as a network drive. Let's go ahead and just do that so they're there every time. Map network drive. Now also, if you do decide to do this, make sure you have basically your IP locked or static IP on your server. I do this through my router. I basically go in and tell it to lock it or set it based off the MAC address so it never changes and you have no conflicts on your network. I could go into a lot more detail on this, but I'm not great at explaining it. I understand how it works, but I'm not great at explaining it. There's a lot of good videos on the internet I would recommend taking a look at if you really want to know how to do this. Building in this case was not the best experience I've ever had. I've spent countless times rebuilding it. I did not bother at the end dealing with all the wires, as you can see, though the case has some decent cable management channels here on the side and on the bottom. The front, I also did not mention, I had the door off and I showed the initial part of the video. It does have a door you can put on, so that way you can close it up, and turning it around, it also has a lock on it too if you want to lock the door. Otherwise though, looking on the inside of the case, you have, you have a bit of room. For a micro case with everything that's packed in here, it is still though an absolute nightmare trying to wire this thing up. Like I said, if you're gonna do this, buy this case, definitely put your wires in first, like your motherboard, your 24 pin and your 8 pin, because good luck getting your hand down there and doing anything like that once you have this board in. Especially since the case mounts the board upside down. So it's not in the traditional fashion. As you can see, you got the PCI Express cards at the top and your CPU down at the bottom. Other than that, you can take a look at the case. It's not a big case. It's a micro, but I'd say it's more like a mid-tower. And you're able to fit 8 drives in this thing, actually even more. If I come back around to this side, you can mount a couple SSDs right here also. So it gives you a lot of options, including, like I showed before, your option for the optical drive there for a full-size one, and a slim one right down here. Building in this case was not the best experience I've ever had. I've spent countless times rebuilding it. I did not bother at the end dealing with all the wires, as you can see, though the case has some decent cable management channels here on the side and on the bottom. The front, I also did not mention, I had the door off and I showed the initial part of the video. It does have a door you can put on, so that way you can close it up, and turning it around, it also has a lock on it too if you want to lock the door. Otherwise though, looking on the inside of the case, you have, you have a bit of room. For a micro case with everything that's packed in here, it is still though an absolute nightmare trying to wire this thing up. Like I said, if you're gonna do this, buy this case, definitely put your wires in first, like your motherboard, your 24 pin and your 8 pin, because good luck getting your hand down there and doing anything like that once you have this board in. Especially since the case mounts the board upside down. So it's not in the traditional fashion. As you can see, you got the PCI Express cards at the top and your CPU down at the bottom. Other than that, you can take a look at the case. It's not a big case. It's a micro, but I'd say it's more like a mid-tower. And you're able to fit 8 drives in this thing, actually even more. If I come back around to this side, you can mount a couple SSDs right here also. So it gives you a lot of options, including, like I showed before, your option for the optical drive there for a full-size one, and a slim one right down here. My final thoughts on this case is it's an excellent case. It is a lot of money though. This cost me $234 back at the beginning of August of 2024. Prices probably will go up and down on this thing, but that's what I paid. Like I said, my downsides, it's hard to work in, but what you're getting. If you ever go price out like a USB NAS, they're pretty much just as expensive as this whole case, that you could pretty much run a daily, you know, PC in this thing. Obviously, I'm using it for a server, but if you wanted to, you could build this up as your gaming PC and run it just fine. So that's my take on this case. I think it's an excellent case, just a little hard to work on. And this is coming from somebody who does work with ITX cases primarily. So that's everything for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.